Yagna Deva Tasmai Namaha. So today we are continuing our discussion of the second chapter. So in the last session we discussed the 16th verse of the second chapter. That is a very philosophical verse. Evam pravartidam chakram na anuvartayadi iha yaha aghayuhu indriya ramo mogham partha sajivati. It is the verse. Here the Lord is speaking about a chakram. A chakram means a wheel, a rotating wheel. Now, you find this term used in many Oriental religious traditions, not only Hinduism. With equal prominence, you find in Buddhism. The entire phenomenon of human life is a wheel, built upon the foundation of our desire and prompted by our actions, which again cause rebirth. We are born again with the samskaras or impressions gathered from previous life cycles, which constitute our character, our attitudes, our behavior. And this cycle continues. That is birth, life, death and rebirth. This is a very unique concept. In the philosophy of cyclicism, it is called. It's not, life is not just one chance. According to the characteristics, according to the impressions that we have gathered in previous life, we are born again. And when we are born, there are certain tendencies over which we have no control, which are in no way related to the tendencies of our parents or grandparents. You cannot find any trace if you analyze through genealogy or genetics. That's why in the same family, sometimes you find 5 children with 5 entirely different characteristics. Going to the same school, growing up in the same environment, but displaying totally contrasting opposite characteristics. Which means a tiny fraction of their character, of their characteristics are related to genetics. When they are born, the parents also transmit to them certain characteristics, and also influenced by the environment, education, associations, and so on. But at a certain stage, they all become independent. There is a uniqueness about every human individual. And that uniqueness is coming from his own or her own previous life cycle. Certain characteristics, the way we respond and react to situations, the way we look upon our life, there are certain unique patterns which are totally different from individual to individual, which shows every human being is fundamentally a lonely traveler going through this cycle. Now Lord Krishna says, though people are different, still there is a consistent rhythm or harmony that we should follow. There is an inter-relatedness and interdependence among living beings, and also there is an interdependence and an inherent harmony between ourselves and the external nature. when we break this harmony and when we create disharmony, we give trouble to nature and we give trouble to ourselves. So, those who consciously live in total disharmony with the external nature, with this existing pattern or rhythm, they are bringing their own downfall. So the metaphor is mokham means a person akhayuha indriyaram mokham partha sajivati. A person who doesn't follow this wheel of harmony, he is or she is living in sin because she or he is satisfied with the senses. So those who just look upon nature as just a raw material for our own enjoyment, they are not actually living in harmony with nature. So they are creating disharmony. They are disturbing this interrelatedness and interharmoniousness, and therefore they are committing what we call in Buddhism and Hinduism called adharma, the opposite of dharma. So this is what we discussed elaborately in the last class, because now we are continuing the same trend of thought in the coming verse. 17th. Yastu atmaradireva syat atmatuptascha manavaha atmani eva cha santushtaha tasya karyam na vidyate. So, how does an individual who follows this pattern of harmony or harmonious relationship with other living beings and also with external nature, how does he look upon life? The central point is such a person who is devoted to Atman, manifesting as this inherent harmony. He is always contented, he is satisfied. He is not satisfied because he gets something from nature. He is satisfied in his being aware of his identity with Atman. Atman here is the same thing as the essence of this wheel of harmony, that is Atman. So what is the basis of interrelatedness? The basis of interrelatedness or interdependence or interharmony is the same Atman, the same soul is inherent, is immanent in all of us, and the same Atman is present everywhere. So we cannot physically or psychologically do anything that disturbs this existing harmony. That is central principle. It's a very profound philosophy. So you can find here a philosophy of harmony and interrelatedness. And we can find this happening at every stage of our history of industrialization. Industrialization is not all that bad. It is certainly necessary, but at a certain point it becomes blind. It becomes blind exploitation, looking upon the whole creation as if God created every other being for us to kill and eat and enjoy. Also every plant, the water, the air, all these, God has given us for us to enjoy, eat and enjoy. So if we just pays our dues to God, he has no problem. He will be on our side. He will not create any problem. Now that is you are reducing God to such a very, very selfish, dogmatic, reckless being. You just pay him his dues and it's okay. And then we can exploit the whole nature, kill animals, destroy nature, and for our own enjoyment. But this verse tells you, if you destroy the external nature, or if you hurt another living being, then you're hurting your own inner essence, because the same Atman that is present in you, the same divine spark is present everywhere. So we cannot come to a private agreement with God, an understanding. So all right, you're on my side. So you can do whatever you want. No. So this is a kind of spirituality that goes beyond religion. So one great commentator, not Shankaracharya but Ramanuja, he says, Bhuta Shabda Nidishtani Sajivanti Sharirani Parjanyadannam Yajnat Parjanyaha Yajna Kartru Vyapar Rupat Karmanaha Karmaja Sajivat Sharira Sajivam Shariram Tu Punarannadi Anyonya Karya Karana Bhavena Chakravat Parivartamana. So Karya Karana means cause and effect. I'm reading rather fast, I'm not explaining every word. So there are a few important commentators of this book. So those of us who read just an English translation of the Bhagavad Gita, we must always keep in mind, we won't be reading this book, nobody will be reading this book, if a great man had not written a commentary on this book in 8th century AD. Because some of you may not be aware of this. There are 18 texts in Hindu tradition which bears the name Gita. 18. There are many Gitas. Gita means a song. Bhagavad Gita means a song sung by the Lord. That's the meaning of Bhagavad Gita. There are 18 such poetical works in the vast Hindu religious literature. Uddhava Gita, Vyadha Gita, Uttara Gita, many. So Sruti Gita, like that. In Mahabharata and Bhagavata Purana. Together there are so many. Now, this work of just 700 verses, which is a fragment of what is the biggest human literary output, Mahabharata, which is more than 100,000 verses. So this tiny fragment of this huge spiritual classic, Mahabharata, it became well known and is still being read, all because the Shankaracharya, who lived in the 8th century, wrote a commentary on this book. And as he explained this book, he interpreted this as a unique spiritual classic of not just Hindus or any work belonging to one religious tradition. So you won't find in this book any instruction that you should go to a temple or a place of worship and pray, nothing of the kind. It all speaks about the human spiritual endeavor, the human quest for higher spiritual values, in any tradition or in no tradition. If wherever you think of something higher and more sublime than this physical body, which is after all not a very big deal, or all these external sensory things, whenever human quest took humanity beyond the physical level, you can find an affinity to the ideas expressed in this book, because it's all about our quest for something sublime, something higher. So here Ramanuja says, that is referring to the previous verse, Ramanuja says, food comes from clouds or rains, and rains again come from the water being absorbed by the sunlight, and rivers empty their waters into ocean, and water is being absorbed by the cloud, the sun, and clouds are formed. Clouds come down to earth as rains, and when there is rain, there is food grains, and there is food grains, there is human life becomes possible. There is prosperity and happiness. So there is an interrelatedness, this wheel. It is a cause-effect wheel. That's what Ramanuja says. Shankaracharya says Jagat Chakram. The entire universe is a cycle. It is moving. There is a cause-effect link. It may not be obvious as a cause-effect link in physics, but it is much more intense and much more strongly and intensely felt and experienced. You can see this when we do something wrong consciously, deliberately. Even if nobody knows about it, there is something in us that something is created in our own mental system, something negative. And that slowly begins to manifest, that builds up, becomes a problem for ourselves. So also when we do something fine, something wonderful, something as yajna, the word, I mentioned this earlier, something yajna means disinterested action, unselfish action, any activity, any mental, verbal or physical activity that we do, a thought, an idea or a word we speak. If we do any of these activities without any selfish motive or with a sublime motive, then it is not an activity any longer. It becomes yajna. So the Sanskrit word is used, yajna. So when you listen to this word yajna as used in Gita, we should clearly remember, if you go to any dictionary, you may not immediately get the meaning in the dictionary, because the dictionary meaning of yajna is totally different, absolutely different. It is a religious ritual. There are 14 types of Vedic rituals. Ancient sages in India used to practice rituals. These rituals constituted the beginning of Vedic spiritual practice. Not going to a temple. There were no temples in those days. In Vedic age, there were no image worship. They used to practice these rituals. They used to offer certain items on the fire, and with uttering some mantras which expressed these sublime thoughts. So those who are interested, is an academic interest. There were 7 Havir Yajnas and 7 Soma Yajnas. Sapta Havir Yajna, Sapta Soma Yajna. So Ajnadhana, Agnihotra, Deshapurnamasa, Agrayana, Chaturmasya, Niruddha Pasubandha, Sautramani. These are all Sapta Havir Yajnas. Then Sapta Soma Yajnas, Agnishtoma, Uthya, Shodasi, Vachipeya, Adhiratra, Aptoryama. Of course, these are all names of ancient Vedic rituals. They were originally called yajna. But when Lord Krishna uses this particular word in Gita, it assumes a great spiritual meaning. And when Shankaracharya wrote a commentary, it becomes a royal highway for our spiritual progress. That is the idea behind it. So, now we will come to the 18th verse. That's very important. Naiva tasya kridenartho na kridene kaschana nachasi sarvabhudeshu kachidartha vyapasraya. Here, the word meaning should be clearly understood. It's a bit tricky verse. Such a person, that's a highly evolved spiritual person who performs all his actions as yajna. He has no object in this world. He has nothing to gain by doing anything and he has nothing to lose by not doing anything, and he has no need of depending upon anything for any object. The idea is he doesn't feel that he has to gain something, he has to achieve something through a deliberate action, physical or mental action. When we have an intense desire for achieving something, and when we when we prepare a plan of action, it implies that there is something imperfect in all of us. So whatever we are trying to get, that we do not already have. Maybe the richest man in the world may be struggling to get $1,000 more, which means he's a poor man actually. Because poverty and richness is a matter of opinion, put in simple language. If you are very rich but you are terribly dissatisfied, you are a very poor person. If you have no money but you are fully contented, you are a rich person. So that is the Vedantic interpretation of richness and opposite, and poverty. So poverty is a psychological, a spiritual problem, and richness is a psychological and spiritual merit achievement. So a spiritually advanced person who has achieved this contentment, as expressed in the 17th verse, he doesn't feel that there is anything in the world for him to achieve. But it doesn't mean that he keeps quiet, doing nothing. In fact, Lord Krishna, the teacher, emphasizes that point in the coming verses. He does everything. He's all the more great because he does everything, though he himself doesn't have anything to achieve by doing any of these things. So that makes him even greater. So, such a person, he is kridartha. And kridartha means a person who feels that he has achieved something which keeps him permanently contented, or in a state of permanent, perpetual contentment. That contentment is what actually makes his life calm and quiet. And that's why he feels there is nothing for him to achieve. Or most of the great spiritual teachers the world has produced were so hardworking, so busy, you don't find a single spiritual seeker who just relaxed doing nothing. They were very happy, very hardworking. Not that they were working with the physical body, teaching instructions, traveling, or just talking to people who came to them. Or even just by meditation, which also is a way of doing service to humanity. It is also a great service because it creates spiritual vibrations which spiritually enrich human life around. So, the point is, such a person, he has absolutely no concept of desire. He has achieved the highest spiritual goal. The 19th verse, Tasmat asakta sadam karyam karma samachara asakto hi acharan karma paramapnodi purushaha. This has something to do with our own everyday life. Therefore, you always should perform your actions which are part of your obligations, but without any attachment. By performing those actions without attachment, one can reach the highest. So, to lead a spiritual life or to achieve spiritual goal, you don't have to get rid of something which you already have. You don't have to achieve or get or gain something which you do not already have. You do not have to get rid of something which you have, or you don't have to get something which you do not already have. You can just take a new perspective in our life. Whatever we do, we can start doing from a different perspective. So, the instruction here is karyam karma samachara. Karyam here means an obligation, a duty, a work that we are expected to do. A doctor who has to treat the patients, an engineer who has to do his work, any person, whatever we are expected to do by virtue of our official position or our need to for making both ends meet. All these, there are certain things. A student has to study, a teacher has to teach, and so on. It's called karyam. Something that is obligatory, part of our professional duty. Now, when we do this professional duty with a lot of obsession, worry, anxiety, and strong attachment, the problem is it creates a lot of anguish, physical strain, mental strain, anxiety, and so on. But this anxiety doesn't improve our performance of the action. It only creates problem for our mind, physical and mental health. Therefore, do this, never be negligent. Gita is very particular. Bhagavad Gita is talking everywhere about unselfishness, detachment, lack of desire, transcending desire, and so on. But it nowhere recommends inaction. Not only that, he recommends action with a lot of efficiency and effectiveness. Well, not only spiritual seekers. Man like Gandhi, the reason why I'm quoting Gandhi is, Gandhiji was not, he was one of the most saintly persons who lived in the last century, but he's not considered to be like a mystic or a prophet of a religion in the conventional sense of the term. But he was not only that, he was doing the opposite of what a prophet normally does, or a spiritual person who meditates for a long time, who goes about preaching philosophy and spirituality. But this man was mostly engaged in political activities, leading people, leading agitation, creating maybe what the government interpreted as restlessness in society, confusion in society. But that itself he did as a yajna. Now what made it yajna? Because he himself had no axe to grind. And he showed that quality throughout. He was totally free from any kind of selfish motive. At the same time, he was not engaged all the time in meditation, contemplation, like a Buddha. No. All the time he was going about, and he had a copy of Bhagavad Gita in his hand, which he looked at, a text that he looked upon as his own mother. And he himself said, if he had any confusion or problem, he looked at, read Gita and led political agitations more vigorously. So does Gita help you to lead a political agitation more? That's what Gandhi did actually. You find many, these Quit India movement and the Dandi movement, we find these letters and these articles is published in Young in India. It's translated into English, 90 volumes, the biggest edition of Gandhi's complete works. You find letters he wrote referring to Gita, how reading Gita gave him a new insight into the psychology of the masses, which helped him to do what? Leading political agitations. And what made it a yajna? He had no selfish motive. He was totally free from any selfish motive. But it was a duty as a leader, the mass leader. It was this karyam, means obligation. But asakta, that's why tasmat asakta sadadam. Therefore, do whatever may be your duty without any attachment, without any selfish motive. Gandhi's example can give us a lot of confidence, because Gandhi could do that, and most people can do that, because we don't have to do what he was doing most of the time. But he was the great saint because his perspective to what he was doing was that of a saint, absolute freedom from any selfish motive. So, and that itself becomes a path to attain the highest in spiritual life. Param apnodi. Param means highest spiritual goal. So, any person who just gives a new approach to what he does or she does, straight away he is entering a path that takes him the highest spiritual goal. Means this freedom from selfish motive. Then in the 20th verse, there is a reference to some of the great spiritual men, and they were also men of great spiritual merit, spiritual achievement, but they were not prophets in the conventional sense. So in the 20th verse, there are few more examples you find. Karmayoga samsiddhim astida janakateha lokasangrahme vapi sampasyan kartumarhasi. By action of karma yoga alone, great philosopher kings like Janaka and others attained perfection. Therefore, just for setting an example for others, you should perform action without a selfish motive. So Janaka's example is given here. Janaka in a way fits in with the qualifications that Plato outlines in Republic, the philosopher king. Only the highest philosopher can a most effective administrator. That's why a Sanskrit verse tells you, give money to those who don't want it. Give power to those who are running away from it. So if you give money to a very greedy person, that will create problems for society and for himself. If you give power to a very power-hungry person, it leads to a lot of trouble in society. So Kalidasa, as I mentioned earlier once, Kalidasa makes a statement, Yavvanam dhana sambatti prabhutvam matamevacha ekaikamavi anarthaya kimi yatra chadurthaya. So youth, money, power, and then overlordship, you are a big leader, and then very egoistic. Any one of these four problems can be disastrous. Suppose a person combines all this in one personality, but to speak of his fate. That's why only a person who can think beyond money should handle money. Only a person who thinks beyond, thinks of higher values, beyond power, should handle power. Because to handle something, you should know its limitation. If a person thinks money is the highest and if he gets money, it will be a problem. So Janaka was such a person. Janaka, the King Janaka. His name is mentioned in the Ramayana and also in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, in Shukla Yajurveda. So he appears many times in the Mahabharata, in Ramayana and the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. Some of the most profound spiritual, philosophical debates taking place in the ancient Vedic scripture involved Janaka. So there's an interesting story about him, Janaka. I mean, how a philosopher practices, he handles political power and wealth. So one day he was sitting in his court, and there were many courtiers and also many common people who were not very rich in ancient times. Common folk were also admitted. Population was very small. Maybe the story goes back to at least 3500 BC, so must be much older. That's the That's the book that which mentions this story. This story is from 3500 BC. So Janaka was sitting in his court. He's a mighty king and his emperor. And at that time, somebody came with news that the capital city, the palace all around flames, caught fire. So immediately, and also the whole city is surrounded by fire. Buildings, homes have caught fire. So the ministers sat there, the king sat there, but some of the commoners who didn't have much to lose, they ran to save whatever little they had. Now, we are not criticizing that, but the main point is something else. Janaka sat there quiet, calm and quiet. He made arrangements for people to go and put out the fire, but there was no agitation on his face. So, there's a Sanskrit verse, Mithilayam pradagdhayam name kaschit pranasyati. Somebody asked him, a sage asked him, how could you keep quiet when the whole palace, your own city, were on fire? He said, Mithila is the name of the city, somewhere close to today's Bihar state. So he said, well, the city is on fire, but I'm not going to lose anything. So in the further discussions, they asked him, who is Name kaschit pranasyati. Me means mine, is a possessive case. Me, mama, mine. The city is on fire, but there is nothing that is mine which is going to be destroyed. So what is mine? He said, I am the Atman. Then he gave a long discourse on his own true identity. I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am not that. And that's how Vedanta philosophy evolves. So you find many such interesting debates and discussions in ancient text. It doesn't mean inactivity or negligence of duty or lack of enthusiasm or lack of professionalism. What it means is something else. So that point is emphasized not in the 21st verse but in the 25th verse, because they are interrelated, because this verse can create a confusion. Does karmayoga mean inaction, lack of enthusiasm, lack of activity, lowering the guard? No. So 25th verse, if you look, saktaha karmani avidvamso yadha kurvanti bharata kuryad vidvan tatha asaktaha jigishuku lokasangraham. So this 25th verse talks about two types of people in the world. On the one hand, people who work hard with a lot of motive, anxiety, attachment, and worry, anguish. They feel that everything depends upon them. So, along with the work, they also carry a heavy burden of mental anxiety and worry and if that is actually what creates problem for the mind. Body, of course, follows its own law. Body is part of 5 elements. But why should mind be affected? Mind is affected not because body is tired. Mind is affected because we look upon body as the only entity, and we look upon our happiness related to bodily experiences. The moment we think beyond the body, then we think of mind, and then immediately we realize that mind is linked to something even beyond itself, Atman. So here, saktaha means those who are attached. Karmani avidvamso yadha kurvanti bharata. Avidvamsa means those who are not aware, or those who are ignorant of this great philosophy of unselfish action and practice of unselfishness. Those who are not aware of this high philosophy. Those who are not aware of the philosophy of karma yoga. Such people. They are fully attached. Every small little problem becomes a big headache. And they are suffering from anxiety, anguish, worry all the time. On the one hand. On the other hand, another person, maybe his brother or whoever maybe, he is equally efficient. He also works for 15 hours. The former person who is fully attached and worried and always anxious about the results of his actions, he works for 15 hours a day. Let us say another person, his neighbor, also works for 15 hours a day. But the neighbor is different. The neighbor, he is not worried, totally free from worry and anxiety. But he also works with the same enthusiasm, efficiency, and but no attachment. So he is free from anxiety. Such a person is called Vidwan. So two types of persons, individuals are mentioned here. Those who are not aware of this spiritual philosophy of karma yoga, and those who are aware of this. The only difference is those who are not aware of this philosophy of disinterested action, so to speak. They are always worried because they do not know. They think even the smallest problem at a physical level, material level, is a big disaster, because they think there is only physical enjoyment that is to be achieved. The other person thinks of something beyond body and mind. So it is just a matter of perspective, just a matter of the way we look upon ourselves and life. So that's the verse to be remembered when you read the previous verses. 25th verse should be always kept in mind. It is not lack of enthusiasm, negligence or indifference to action or duties that we are talking about. We are talking about the way our mind perceives our duties and obligations and actions. That is something that we can try to change. Duties we may not be able to change. Work we may not be able to avoid. Obligations also we cannot avoid. But we can, if we try, we can try to change the way we pursue and interpret our actions. So actually karma yogis are able to work with greater efficiency because they are able to concentrate their mind more effectively on the work ahead of them. So now we will have interaction for about 10 minutes. Most welcome. Ask questions.
Swamiji?
Yeah.
Does the soul choose where it's going to be born? And are there circumstances on the surface, a family that's disharmonious, a country that's at war? Does the soul know before its birth into this plane, into this level, what to expect, even though it may be disharmonious or harmonious?
Yeah. So the soul as a natural way of connecting with the next life. How does it happen, when we have some very strong desire in our mind, a purpose that we could not achieve or achieve enough in this life. With that strong motive, if a person dies, then when he is born, he will be born in a set of circumstances where he can continue, or rather he automatically, instinctively continues his search for fulfilling those unfulfilled desires. That's why if a person feels at home with great ideas, even if you have a natural interest in reading great books, in spite of many other things available. If you have a natural instinctive interest, it shows it comes from a deeper source. That deeper source is from previous accumulated samskaras and impressions. So choosing means it's an automatic process. This is sometimes mentioned in the Hindu ancient scriptures. Just like, there is one certain creatures or insects which move before it leaves the hold on which it is standing. It will have this front leg fixed on the next step. Then only it leaves behind the other leg, other foot. So this is often given here. So it's a metaphor, it's a analogy given here. So Lord Krishna is answering an interesting question from Arjuna, who asked the question. The question is, what happens to people who have done a lot of spiritual practices but do not succeed, do not become fully enlightened, and doesn't get a chance to get fully enlightened? So does it mean that all our prayers, spiritual efforts will go in vain? No. What you have accumulated in this life creates the background, a kind of spiritual bank balance. When you are born again, you instinctively remember, not always, but how do we remember? When we go to a place and we feel a natural connection, our mind doesn't feel any conflict in a holy place, or when you discuss a spiritual subject, mind doesn't feel any conflict. Then what it means is the mind has something in it, impressions, samskaras, or coming from previous life. So it connects with the holy place where you find yourself. If there is total disconnect, then you'll run away. Whether go and walk in the marina or the beach instead of boredom. This philosophy seems so abstruse, so obscure. You can't bear it, in fact. It's true. We feel a disconnect, actually. Our mind doesn't feel at home. But if your previous life has already prepared a background, then mind doesn't revolt. Otherwise, mind cannot withstand. So to ask the question whether the soul chooses or not specifically, but the general background is prepared in previous life. It may be in one. It need not be the same country, same continent, the same culture. It be transcontinental, transcultural migration of souls. Yeah. Certain, very few instances like the Buddha, the Dalai Lama, you hear about within the same clan or group, the child is able to select certain things left behind by the previous Lama. That is a different thing. We are talking about the general humanity.
Early in your discussion, you stressed understanding that we are connected with nature and with other people. How do we feel that connection while simultaneously remaining kind of detached and understanding that, this is transient?
Yeah. So once we understand that what we do doesn't affect, the impact of what we do is not limited to ourselves, but also it affects others all around as much as it affects our own mind. Once we understand this, then we feel a unity between with outside and inside. So external nature, internal nature, that line of demarcation, we don't very often feel when we feel the harmony within. When we have that harmony, we don't feel any conflict. The natural mind, we feel quite at home with doing good things, the right things, because our mind has connected with the external nature. It has harmonized with the outside. When there is disharmony, we feel friction. When you have already harmonized, then we don't feel any friction. There is no need to deliberately make an effort to connect the external world. Once we take certain good decisions, that itself creates our mind, creates the right background in our mind, which creates this internal harmony. That's the idea. Even if we look upon our own duties and obligations as a way, as a yajna, as we mentioned earlier, as a way of doing our best for the good of the world, that itself is enough. Because that brings an inner harmony to our own internal system. And once that is achieved, then there is no need to make an effort to connect with the external world. You won't feel any friction. Any more questions? So we have an announcement, that is next week there will be no class. I'll be traveling, so we will have class the following week. You can always see our website. Just Google Vedanta Society San Francisco, that's enough. We can see our website, we can find announcements if you have any doubt. There will be no class here next Friday. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.